It immediately raised the question, why is there so much interest now? This game has been around for years, and nothing extremely spectacular seems to have suddenly happened, but the internet quickly gave some answers. In the TCG world, the biggest emotions are naturally driven by two main games, Pokémon and Magic. That's where we see the biggest swings and the biggest discussions about supply, reprints, prices, and MSRP. But we have to remember that TCGs cover a very wide range of different games that from time to time manage to remind everyone that they still exist. And the game that has definitely reminded people of itself very strongly in recent days is the somewhat forgotten Lorcana. At Card Horizon, we discovered that something was happening with Lorcana almost by accident, because we simply saw a very large increase in sales volume. In Pokémon, for example, it is not unusual when buyouts, especially from the secondary market or after official printing ends, cause major price swings in either direction. Magic is a game where the excitement around price and product quantity usually happens at launch, with swings mostly limited to collector booster boxes. But when it comes to Lorcana, I think this is actually the first time we are going to discuss it, even though Lorcana is absolutely not a new game. Lorcana came out a few years ago, and since the company behind this game was Ravensburger, often jokingly and quite rightly described as a puzzle manufacturer, for that kind of company, it wasn't an easy topic. It was definitely a jump into the deep end, and that is why many people predicted that Lorcana could run into trouble. A good card game often requires surgical precision in deciding how many boxes should go where, at what price, and how to reprint in a way that provides cards for players without discouraging collectors. These are all very complicated things that many card game manufacturers had to learn through trial and error. And that is why Magic and Pokémon, with nearly 30 years of experience, are definitely better adapted to the different kinds of challenges that can appear on this market. More or less, they know the playbook for what to do and how to handle it. Lorcana, as a completely new game, already had significant issues with product oversupply in its first 2 years. And even though its early reception was absolutely ecstatic, it was mainly because there were many players. Post-Magic players, let's call them that. But the truth is that Magic, as a game, is starting to appeal to a slightly different type of player than the one it historically targeted. Lorcana appeared as a game where adults experienced with other card games could immediately imagine playing it with their kids. Cool, complex, intuitive, with very calm and positive lore, plus Disney and everything connected with it. So Lorcana's launch was extremely enthusiastic. But then certain problems started to emerge, as I mentioned, largely because the manufacturer did not yet have enough experience to properly control not the quality, but the quantity of boxes entering the market, which sometimes overheated the market. And at certain points, stores also had to get rid of that stock like a hot potato. Lorcana started to retreat, at least to the second tier, if not the third tier. However, time kept passing, and Lorcana still had its loyal players and fans who continued to support the game. To a large extent, these were people looking for that kind of strategic depth in cards, but not in the traditional fantasy lore that appears in the vast majority of other role-playing, strategy, RPG, and card games. Lorcana is relatively unique in that regard, and the Disney universe carries the game in a way that those large premiere events being organized attract attendance numbers that many Magic events today would probably envy. And just when everyone was slowly starting to forget about Lorcana, here at our store, Lorcana is on our mural like all the other games. We haven't forgotten it either. However, we have treated it, and we still treat it, as a supplementary game. Right now, you could say that the TCG pie is divided in such a way that Lorcana is just, as I mentioned, a supplement to that overall pie. It has its fans, and the product does attract interest. People who discover that a game exists in the Disney universe are often interested in learning it. I once bought some pre-constructed decks myself and played a few games. I have to honestly admit that Lorcana seemed to me a bit too similar in some ways to other games. I did not find anything particularly unique in it. But of course, that is a matter of taste, and there are many players who actually switched from their previous games to Lorcana, so it is really a matter of preference and simply gameplay, which some people like more and others like less. And you can imagine that when Lorcana existed in our minds as a kind of game with a certain status, you could say closer to Flesh and Blood or Star Wars, and people who want to enter TCGs in a pleasant format, visually, aesthetically, and design-wise. So when we finally realized the scale of interest around Lorcana at that moment, and boxes started selling out, not only Wilds Unknown, but also many previous expansions. Although not all of them. Winterspell, for example, I think was mostly missed by this wave of buyouts. It immediately raised the question, why is there so much interest now? This game has been around for years, and nothing extremely spectacular seems to have suddenly happened, but the internet quickly gave some answers, and I interpret them as nothing more than temporary interest in Lorcana from a certain group of people. People who first discovered this phenomenon in Pokémon, and then, you could say, also took advantage of the fact that One Piece had a truly huge fanbase. A huge universe, players, hype after the Netflix series, and so on. So this group of speculators also appeared in One Piece. And even though we felt the difference on sealed boxes, the most speculative prices, the exponential growth, and the massive hype happened mainly around those very high-end cards, mangas, highly graded PSA 10s, and Beckett Black labels. Those were already reaching dizzying amounts, sometimes 5 or even 6 figures as asking prices. And once in Pokémon and One Piece, this whole group of speculators, traders, flippers, and graders had already cleaned out a lot. I get the impression that this group of tourists is now slowly starting to visit Lorcana, because from this very expansion, Wilds Unknown, Buzz Lightyear, with its extremely rare iconic rarity, in PSA 10, and we know how hard it is right now to even grade cards and approach grading seriously, because we don't really know what's next with PSA. We know that, in practice, only the more expensive tiers are currently able to grade these cards relatively smoothly. These slabs are temporarily starting to look like something much more exclusive and unique than, in my opinion, they really are. And it was precisely graded cards from Wilds Unknown, especially Buzz Lightyear, that started to reach astronomical prices, going into thousands of dollars in auction sales. 6, 7, 8, even 9,000. These are the kinds of prices that Lorcana PSA 10 slabs are already starting to reach right now. And to be honest, this increase and these prices look a little unnatural to me, and still feel, after all, a bit engineered by a group of people trying to move this speculation across different card games. Personally, I know this is nothing more than looking into a crystal ball. But I think that if this phenomenon works in Lorcana and allows these people to heavily control the supply of these cards in PSA 10, while grading is currently inconvenient, then these prices could, for a while, remain very high for Lorcana slabs. And if someone watched Toy Story or Frozen, for example, and wants to own a card because it connects to that movie, that story, or a character they like, because they have great memories with their kids, then you have to remember that slab prices right now are very speculative and very subjective. So if you want to collect these things, I would still hold off when it comes to slabs. And since I mentioned that crystal ball, just between us, I think Riftbound, as a product, from a huge developer and publisher like Riot Games, will at some point also get on similar tracks. It may eventually have a long enough history for speculators to appear there too. But let's leave Riftbound for now, and summarize Lorcana one more time. With Lorcana, for now, we have to be prepared for something that already happened in other card games. A game that had its own kind of flow, its own pace of releases, print runs, and premieres. Now a fairly large group of speculators is coming in, and they will influence, at least in the short term, the prices and availability of different products, including the next Lorcana expansion. And if you simply want to play or collect, then it is still worth getting to know these boxes, and stocking up early. Because if availability is really good at launch, then the price should be comparable to the pre-order price. But what matters is that if this trend of Pokemon Bros and Finance Bros continues, and they understand that you can flip cards with very low pop reports, or cards that very few people have pulled from a product yet, then the price can be driven up significantly. And if it gets driven up, people usually love ripping products where those cards can be found. If this phenomenon repeats with the next expansion, Lorcana availability might become an issue. However funny that sounds, because, as I mentioned, Lorcana was not really a game with major availability problems until now. But these problems are starting to appear. The buyouts show this, and the next release may give us the answer. If you want to make sure there are enough boxes for you, and you are a Lorcana fan, then the pre-order for the next set is already launching on our Card Horizon website right now. Make sure that there will be enough for you, and you do not miss out. Take care.